My name is Mason Hartwell, and I'm 32 years old. I don't usually go to family weddings anymore. I learned my lesson after the last one. The one where I caught my cousin Alicia making fun of the suit I wore, loudly, in front of her bridesmaids. That time, I just smiled and swallowed it. But this time I shouldn't have even gone. The wedding was for my younger cousin Chloe, the golden child of the Hartwell family. Everything about her was picture perfect. The career, the fiancé, the house her parents helped her buy, the social media accounts where her life looked like it had been edited by a movie director. I don't hold any of that against her. What I did hold against her, and the rest of my extended family, was how easily they dismissed me the second my life didn't look like theirs. I work in wine distribution, or more recently, I was working in it. A few months ago, I left my job to pursue something a little more ambitious, buying my own vineyard. I know, it sounds like a fantasy. Everyone made sure to tell me that too. Be realistic, Mason, my Aunt Janine said at Thanksgiving. You don't just buy a vineyard. They laughed over their wine glasses, not realizing I'd spent the last 2 years quietly saving every extra penny I made. I lived small. No new clothes. No vacations. No nights out. I was careful, disciplined, and absolutely no one noticed. So when I showed up at Chloe's wedding, wearing the same navy suit I'd worn to 4 other family functions, I could feel the whispers already. The only reason I even showed up was because my mother, sweet and endlessly optimistic, had asked me to come for her sake. She knew how hard I'd been working. She believed in me, the only one who really did. The wedding was held at some high-end venue just outside the city. One of those places with white walls, chandeliers, and a garden that looked like it had been grown from a Pinterest board. Everyone looked like a walking ad for a luxury magazine. I walked in feeling like a sales rep who'd wandered into a billionaire's gala. I didn't even make it to my seat before the first passive-aggressive jab hit. "Oh, Mason," Chloe's fiancé said, barely hiding a smirk. "Didn't recognize you. That the same suit from Melissa's wedding?" I smiled. "Yep, still fits." He blinked, clearly not expecting that. Then he just laughed and patted me on the back like I was a lovable fool. The ceremony passed in a blur, and I managed to stay out of everyone's way during the photos. At the reception, I got seated at the overflow table, the one with 2 distant cousins, a great-uncle who kept falling asleep, and a random friend of the bride who didn't know anyone. I didn't mind. It was quiet, peaceful, until Alicia came over. "Mason," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "Come on, you can't just hide here. At least come say hi to the family." I should have said no, but something about her tone, that mocking, performative concern, made me follow her. She led me straight to the main table, where Chloe and her bridesmaids were sipping champagne and gossiping like they were filming a reality show. And that's when it happened. One of Chloe's friends, someone I didn't know, looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you must be the cousin from, what was it? The Budget Vineyard Project?" They all laughed. Then Alicia chimed in. "Don't talk to him. He's the one who couldn't even afford a tux for the wedding." The laughter this time was louder. A couple of people tried to hide it. Most didn't bother. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, the cheap stitching on my jacket suddenly feeling like a spotlight. I looked at Chloe. She didn't say anything, just sipped her drink and turned away. I muttered, "Excuse me," and walked back to my table. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just sat down and stared at my half-empty glass of water, trying not to let the sting of humiliation creep too deep into my chest. But inside, I was burning. They didn't know. They didn't know that I was already in the final stages of bidding for a vineyard out in Sonoma. That after dozens of failed meetings, rejected loan applications, and nights spent crunching numbers until 3 a.m., a small, struggling estate had finally agreed to consider my offer. I'd flown out there twice, walked the soil, tasted the grapes, talked with the current owner about legacy, about family. But to them, I was still just Mason, the poor cousin, the dreamer, the guy who wore the same suit twice. The reception carried on. Speeches, toasts, and an over-the-top cake that looked more like a sculpture than dessert. I kept my head down, texting my mom occasionally just to have someone to talk to. She was sitting with her old friends on the other side of the hall, blissfully unaware of the earlier humiliation. I didn't want to ruin her night. Then it happened. Just as they were cutting the cake, a long, sleek black car pulled up in front of the venue. You could see it through the giant glass windows that overlooked the driveway. A few people glanced over, curious. I didn't think much of it. Maybe someone important had arrived late. The driver stepped out first. Tall, suit pressed within an inch of its life. Then the back door opened. A man stepped out. Older, silver hair, commanding presence. He walked with purpose. He looked like someone who didn't get ignored at parties. He stepped into the hall, scanned the room, and said in a loud, clear voice, "Sorry to interrupt. Is Mr. Hartwell here?" Every head turned. I blinked. I slowly stood up. He walked directly to me, pulled a sleek leather folder from his briefcase, and handed it to me with both hands. "They accepted your bid," he whispered, with a small smile. "The Vineyard, it's yours." There was a moment of silence. Then my Aunt Janine dropped her fork. And that was just the beginning. The moment the words left his mouth, it was like time cracked in half. I stood there, folder in hand, with 24 eyes boring into me. The man, his name was Mr. Caldwell, the estate lawyer I'd been working with for weeks, gave me a firm nod and stepped back. As he turned to leave, the hush that had swallowed the room began to break apart. "Wait, what Vineyard?" someone near the front whispered. "Did he say accepted his bid?" said another. But the voice that finally shattered the silence came from my cousin Alicia. "Oh, come on," she scoffed, laughing like it was some elaborate prank. "This is a joke, right? Mason, you hired someone to crash the wedding and pretend you're some vineyard owner? That's honestly kind of sad." I didn't say anything, just opened the folder. Inside were the finalized documents. Legal signatures. A confirmation of the wire transfer that had cleared an hour ago. The Vineyard, Woodmere Hill, a 56-acre estate with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay vines stretching across gentle slopes, was now under my name. I looked up at Alicia, then Chloe, then my Aunt Janine, who still hadn't picked up her fork. "No joke," I said quietly. "I just didn't think this was the right time to bring it up." The silence that followed wasn't stunned anymore. It was uneasy, embarrassed. People glanced at each other, unsure of how to process what just happened. A few faces, the ones who had laughed the loudest earlier, were now frozen mid-chew. And then, from the other side of the room, I heard my mom's voice. "Mason." She pushed through the crowd, looking concerned. I raised the folder gently in her direction. "Mom, it's done. I got it." She blinked. "You mean?" "Woodmere. It's mine." I'll never forget the way her face changed. From confusion, to dawning realization, to absolute pride. She wrapped her arms around me without hesitation. "I knew you'd do it," she whispered. "I knew you would." I don't know what felt better, the hug, or the look of utter confusion spreading across Chloe's face. "But wait," she said slowly, walking toward us with her champagne still in hand. "You actually bought a vineyard? Like a real one?" "Yep," I said simply. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she asked, but there was no curiosity in her tone, just frustration, like she'd been robbed of a piece of gossip she now desperately wanted. I shrugged. Didn't seem like anyone cared. Behind her, her fiancé was shifting uncomfortably. Alicia was silent. My uncle, Janine's husband, muttered something about checking the valet. And Janine herself, always the loudest critic of my delusions, was now suddenly very interested in the flower arrangement in front of her. Then came the pivot, that sudden shift you always see in people like them. When the story flips and they try to rewrite it as if they were always on your side. "Oh, Mason," Janine finally spoke, forcing a brittle smile. "That's wonderful news. You know, I always told your mother you had a good head on your shoulders." I met her gaze. "You told her I was wasting my life on a fantasy." She let out a dry chuckle. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. You know we all tease each other. It's family." "Sure," I said, folding the folder shut. "Family." I turned back to my mom and whispered, "Want to get out of here?" But before she could answer, Chloe stepped closer again, eyes a little too wide now. "Wait, is it that vineyard near the river? The one with the rose garden?" I nodded. "That's the one." "No way," she breathed. "That's stunning. I saw photos on Instagram. It's like full-on fairy tale vibes. You could host weddings there." There it was. The moment the gears clicked in her mind. And before I could even process that, she leaned forward just a bit and asked, voice syrupy sweet, "Would you ever consider, letting us do the reception there? For the photos?" I looked at her, at the girl who hadn't defended me once today, who sat silently while her friends and cousins mocked me, who had just hours ago laughed at my suit and my dreams. And I smiled. "I don't think so." The words weren't angry. They weren't spiteful. They were calm, clean, honest. And it was that calm that hit her the hardest. She blinked. What? I shrugged. It's not available. Especially not for people who thought I was a punchline 5 minutes ago. You could almost hear the temperature in the room drop. My mom gently took my arm. Mason, let's go. I nodded. But before I turned, I looked around one last time. At the faces now quietly chewing their cake with shame or discomfort. At the cousins who'd laughed behind their glasses. At the aunt who had once told me I was too soft to survive in business. I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I just said, enjoy the wedding. And we walked out the door, past the marble columns and the valet, toward the same car Mr. Caldwell had arrived in. The driver opened the door for us, and I slid inside. As we pulled away, I glanced back once, just in time to see Alicia standing at the window, watching the car disappear into the evening. And I couldn't help but smile. The ride back to the hotel was quiet at first. My mom kept glancing at me like she was still trying to piece everything together, like she wasn't sure if she'd imagined the whole thing. Then finally, she spoke. You didn't tell me it was Woodmere. I didn't want to jinx it, I said, still staring out the window. We've been through so many maybes over the years. I thought if I talked about it too soon, it'd slip through my fingers. She reached over and took my hand. I'm proud of you, Mason. I always have been. But tonight, that was something else. I didn't say anything right away. I just nodded. There was a strange stillness in my chest. Not joy, not relief. Just calm. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd finally stepped out from under someone else's shadow. When we got back to the hotel, I opened my laptop. The Vineyard team had already emailed to congratulate me and schedule the official handover tour. I skimmed through the message and noticed something at the bottom. An invitation to attend the annual Vintners Gala, a sort of private gathering for estate owners and major distributors. It was being held in 2 weeks. I clicked RSVP. Then I sat back and thought about the reception. How Chloe's eyes had shifted the second she realized what Woodmere meant. How Janine had gone from scoffing at me to smiling like we'd always been close. How Alicia hadn't said a single word after I walked away. But it wasn't over. Not really. Because 3 days later, the text started. First it was Alicia. Hey, Mason. Crazy night, huh? Just wanted to say I hope we didn't come off too strong. We were just joking around. You know how weddings get. Then my uncle. Heard about the vineyard. That's impressive, son. We should talk sometime. I might have a few investor friends you'd want to meet. Then Chloe. Hey, can we talk? I feel like there's a weird vibe between us after the wedding, and I'd really hate for this to affect our relationship going forward. I didn't reply, because I wasn't ready to talk yet. Not because I was angry, but because I needed time to figure out what kind of person I wanted to be now that I had the upper hand. But I did show the text to my mom, who just raised her eyebrows and said, well, look who's remembering they have a cousin. That weekend, I drove up to Woodmere Hill for the first time as its owner. It wasn't a glamorous arrival, no ribbon-cutting ceremony or welcome parade. Just me, in an old car, with a packed lunch and a notepad full of plans. The air smelled like sun-warmed grapes and dry soil. A few of the vines were already heavy with early fruit. The tasting room was modest, but charming. The old owner, Mr. Lavoie, met me by the barn and handed over the keys with a long, firm handshake. You got big dreams, Hartwell? He asked. I do. Good. Dreams keep these vines alive. Just remember, it's not about the wine. It's about the people who drink it. Treat them right. I thought about that as I walked through the fields that evening, watching the lights stretch long over the hills. I thought about how I wanted Woodmere to be something real. Not a status symbol, not a way to rub success in anyone's face. Just something honest and beautiful that I'd built with my own hands. But of course, nothing stays quiet for long. Because the next morning, I woke up to see that Chloe had tagged me in an Instagram story. A slideshow from the wedding. Glittering lights. The cake. Her and her husband dancing. And then a photo of me, standing at the edge of the room, folder in hand, with the caption, when your cousin shows up in a thrift store suit but low-key owns a vineyard, skull emoji. I stared at the screen, my stomach knotting. Not because she'd exposed me. I wasn't hiding anything. But because even now, even after everything, she still didn't get it. Still didn't understand what it meant to work in silence. To chase something no one believed in. To be mocked and dismissed and still keep going. I didn't reply, but I did post a photo that afternoon, my first real post in months. It was a wide shot of the vineyard, golden lights spilling across the hills, rows of vines curving into the horizon. Just a simple caption underneath. Started small, still growing. Within minutes, my DMs lit up. Chloe again, Alicia, even the groom. They wanted to talk, reconnect, grab lunch sometime. And then came the final twist. A call from Janine. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. Hello. Mason, hi. Her voice was bright, rehearsed. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. What's up? Oh, I just wanted to say how proud we all are of you. And also, I had an idea. Chloe and I were thinking, we'd love to do a small family brunch at your vineyard. Nothing big, just a few close relatives. We thought it could be a lovely way to reconnect. I paused. Reconnect? Yes. And it would really help Chloe. The venue they originally booked for her post-wedding photo shoot fell through, and Woodmere is just, well, it's so photogenic. Perfect lighting. That rose garden. Right. There was a silence on her end, like she was waiting for the yes. But instead I said, I'll think about it. Oh, she said, clearly not expecting that. Well, we'd need to know by next week, of course, since her photographer. I said I'll think about it. And I ended the call. But I wasn't thinking about it. I was thinking about something else entirely, something that had been growing slowly in my mind since the day of the wedding, when I walked out with the folder in my hand, and every single one of them stared at me like I was a stranger. Something bigger, something they weren't ready for. I gave them 2 weeks. 2 weeks to see if any of them would follow up with something real, not a photo op request or a fake brunch invite, but an actual apology. Something honest, something I could believe in. It never came. What had come were more posts, more tags. Chloe uploaded an entire carousel of wedding photos, including that shot of me with the folder again, this time cropped tighter, captioned, "When your cousin turns out to be a secret wine King Crown grapes still waiting for our tour, at Mason Hartwell." The comments were full of mutuals I didn't know, dropping things like, "OMG, you didn't tell us you were related to that vineyard," and "free wine hookup," and "that's a flex." It was all aesthetic, all shallow. That's when I made my decision. I emailed my assistant. Yes, I'd hired one. Her name was Jody, sharp as a razor and twice as quick, and told her to clear the calendar for the last weekend of the month. I had something special in mind for the grand reopening of the vineyard under new ownership. Something unforgettable. Jody helped me put together a private invitation list. Old friends, a few loyal mentors, people I respected from the industry, a handful of former coworkers who'd been there for me when I was dead broke and eating ramen 4 nights a week. And, almost as an afterthought, I sent out a separate invitation to my extended family. The email was formal, polite, professional. Woodmere Hill is officially reopening under new ownership. We would be honored to have you join us for a private reception and tour. Dress code is formal. RSVP required. I didn't expect many of them to come. I was wrong. The morning of the event, they showed up in droves. Chloe came first, dressed in an off-white dress that might as well have been a second wedding gown. Her husband trailed behind, taking selfies and whispering to her about where the good angles were. Then came Janine and her husband, both in expensive but loud outfits that screamed new money. Alicia showed up late, of course, in heels too tall for the gravel path, already complaining about the lack of valet service. I greeted them with a smile, professional and distant. Mason, Janine air-kissed the air near my cheek. This place is stunning. You've really outdone yourself. Thanks, I said flatly. You found it okay? Oh yes, Chloe sent us the pin. We're just so excited to see everything. We were actually talking on the way up. Wouldn't it be fun to host a family reunion here next year? Chloe chimed in, looping her arm through mine like we were suddenly best friends. It would be perfect. And those rolling hills, God, they'd look so dreamy in my bridal portfolio. We just have to do a shoot here. I nodded. Let's take a walk first. I led them through the vineyard, down a path lined with lanterns and trimmed rose bushes. The rest of the guests, the real guests, were already gathered near the tasting room, sipping wine, laughing, chatting. People who'd known me back when I was sleeping on an air mattress and mapping out vineyard ownership on napkins. I brought the family group to a private side terrace with a view overlooking the valley. A long table was set there, covered in local produce, cheeses, and wine bottles labeled with the new Woodmere logo, a simple H etched into a grapevine. Alicia picked up a bottle. This is you? Mason, this is gorgeous. You could totally get into Whole Foods with this branding. I already did, I said. She blinked. Wait, seriously? I nodded. The deal closes next month. And Nordstrom's Wine Club is picking up our rose line. There was a pause. Janine cleared her throat. Well, isn't that something? You really turned this all around, didn't you? And there it was again. That same shift. That same tone. The rewritten history. We always knew you had it in you, she added quickly. Chloe nodded. Totally. We were just teasing at the wedding. You know that, right? That's when I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small folder. Familiar shape. Different contents. I actually brought something for you all, I said. I handed each of them an envelope with their names printed in gold. They opened them slowly. Inside, gift certificates. But not for wine. Not for brunch. For nothing. Instead, the letter read, Asterisk, this is not a gift. It's a reminder that silence is louder than mockery. That real support shows up when no one's watching. That I remember everything you said and everything you didn't. You're standing here today not because you believed in me, but because now you want to be seen believing. Woodmere Hill is closed to you. There will be no reunion here. No bridal shoot. No influencer brunch. You may tour the grounds today. You may even take your selfies. But when the sun sets, you will leave. And you will not be invited back. Asterisk. Mason Hartwell. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd felt at that wedding. Chloe's face went white. Alicia muttered, What is this? Janine, for once, was speechless. I gave you a chance, I said quietly. You didn't take it. I turned and walked back toward the main terrace, where laughter and music floated through the air like freedom. They didn't follow. Later that evening, as the sun dropped below the hills and the lanterns flickered to life, I stood at the top of the vineyard and looked out over the rows of vines. The people who mattered were here. Jody, my mom, my old friend Leo, who used to split sandwiches with me back when we were interns. Mr. Lavoie, the former owner, who raised a glass to me from across the lawn. We toasted under the stars. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not even a little. Because revenge doesn't always come in the form of rage. Sometimes it's just a quiet table set without them. A business that thrives without their name on it. A legacy that belongs to you, and you alone. As the final guests said their goodbyes, I walked my mother to her car. She looked up at me and smiled. You know, I think your grandfather would have been proud. Yeah. He always used to say, the best grapes grow in rocky soil. You proved him right. I hugged her tightly. Then I watched her drive away, headlights fading down the winding road. I stood alone in the vineyard for a moment longer, letting the cool air settle around me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just Mason Hartwell. I was the man who'd made the soil bloom. And I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd already outgrown it.